Welcome to KanTalks. My book was The Panopticon by Jenni Fagan, and the title of my talk is Inflicted by Insanity, because I will be discussing the main character and how I'm going to argue that she was not just tripped out on drugs, but also mentally insane. Alright, so a brief background. Our main character, our protagonist yet antagonist at the same time, started off orphaned at her birth. She was abandoned by her schizophrenic, drugged-out mother. She was soon adopted by a kind foster lady who was, a prostitute. That was fun. However, probably as a result of her trade, she was found a few years later murdered in her bathtub, leaving the main character, her name's Anais, that's important, orphaned again. So since she was left alone without any family, without a name, without birthright, she kept drifting between foster homes and making more trouble. She was sexually abused, she turned to drugs, she started with petty crime, and as a result she ended up in the Panopticon, which is a center for troubled youth, but also kind of doubles as a mental institution. So a brief definition of mental insanity, because that's very important to this argument. We've all heard the, insanity is doing the same thing lots of times and expecting a different result, but actually, mental insanity is a condition that impacts a person's thinking and mood, which results in abnormal mental and behavioral patterns, which usually manifest in forms that defy social norms, like drinking, doing drugs, destroying things. And they have a hard time telling the difference between fantasy and reality. All right. There are many times when Anais denies that she's crazy, but that means next to nothing, and thus I have evidence. She has a very specific game that she plays since she has no knowledge of her family. Whenever she's getting moved around to a different place or she feels depressed or strung out, she will play what she calls the birthday game, where she takes her whole life right back to the beginning, invents parents for herself, her birth story, if she had siblings or not, her situation, new names, which it sounds chill. She was very obviously troubled. However, she took it that little step farther and started trying to make herself into the brand new person she created, just over and over again, so she had very little sense of self. Next, actually one of the main premises of this book is that she believed in an organization which she called the Experiment. They were apparently men with no faces who wore suits and watched her, from the sky, from buildings. They put her on Earth after creating her in a petri dish to kind of see how much awful stuff they could throw at her and therefore kind of be a guinea pig for society. It was super strange and thus mental insanity. Next, and probably one of the most obvious giveaways, is that she sees faces in the walls, especially when she's on drugs, that happens. But even at normal times, she'll see faces in the walls and they'll talk to her and persecute her for all the wrong she's done. That's not good. And finally, she believes that she has a flying cat guardian who kind of follows her from place to place and watches over her. He occasionally appears in the form of a statue, but again, that does not exist. So, why this is important? Was it not drugs that was causing all this crazy? No, it was not. It definitely played a serious factor, and it even probably made it a little worse, but the mental insanity was the root of all the problems, and the drugs just made it blossom into a little tree of poor decisions and impulsivity. Why this is important is that just like she kept denying herself, people aren't typically going to come over and be like, hey, I'm suffering from mental illness, be nice to me. So if, a person is being strange, if they're not, not exactly normal, it still pays to be nice to them because you never know what's going on. But most importantly, hugs, not drugs.